Yeah, many of the kinds of scenes that we have seen in foreign places that would give us a chill, and perhaps leaving a chill, certainly as we watch it take place outside our own Capitol right now. And we understand that both houses of Congress have now adjourned. Casey Hunt, what can you tell us about that?
Well, Lester, I can tell you that things here are escalating pretty quickly. The Capitol Police made an announcement in the well of the House that they were locking down both chambers, the Senate chamber and the House chamber. And when we saw the feed go dark a moment ago, I mean, typically they control whether we can see the House. So when they go into recess, that's often when we lose that feed. It shouldn't be an indication of any violence or problem necessarily, but that is exactly now what you're seeing them sending us. That on the technical side is because the chambers have recessed. So that's what you're seeing on your screen now instead of what's actually going on the floor of both of these chambers. But we're getting reports, Lester, and I should underscore, I'm in the Russell office building, which has been also locked down. We're not allowed to enter or exit the Russell House office building. The tunnels to the Capitol are closed. Many reporters who are inside the Capitol are posting pictures on social media that we're working on verifying, but we have multiple reports of protesters inside the Capitol. So that's something that we're working on finding with our own NBC eyes, but it's clear that there are at least a number of others who are in the complex who are seeing such things. There also has been another report from a reporter that I have worked with for a long time who works for a different news organization of people who are apparently breaking glass on doors. We want to underscore that's, again, something that we want to see with our own eyes to explain to viewers. But I would say that this situation is rapidly becoming more tense, and it's clear that the Capitol Police have had to step in and take a role that I don't think that they expected that they would need to be playing today. So, again, we're going to continue to try and call members that are at the Capitol. We have producers who are inside the Capitol building as we try to report out in a careful way what exactly is happening here, Lester.
And Casey, just to keep us back on track, the objections would lead to 2 hours of debate for each state, so they would have still been discussing Arizona. Is that correct?
That's right, Lester. So what we were seeing happen in both chambers was the debate of that first objection to the Electoral College count. And there's no expectation, and Pete Williams has done a very good job of laying out what the law says about how this process plays out. The idea is that it would be continuous. And again, we haven't seen it very many times, or any version of it very many times in American history. But the idea would have been that those 2 hours of debate would have been continuous, and then you would have seen a vote happen on the floor of each chamber before each chamber then went back to the House of Representatives to resume the joint session to keep counting those votes. So we can at the very least say that protesters have interrupted the counting, the ratification of Joe Biden as president of the United States here. That process is currently on hold because there is concern about the safety of members of Congress as they try to go about carrying out that responsibility. We only got as far as the opening speeches in the Senate, and we were talking earlier about Mitch McConnell and his remarkable statement that our democracy would be in a death spiral if we were to overturn the election based on unproven accusations of fraud. And of course, his critics saying that was far too little too late because, of course, you have seen so many supporters of President Trump believe the misinformation that he has put out there about this election. And now we are seeing them take physical acts. I know Ellison Barber is out on the ground and has been keeping an eye out for any reports of possible violence in these protests. And again, we have not, or I have not witnessed any violence yet here inside the Capitol. So we do want to underscore that. But I think that note from Kevin McCarthy that you mentioned earlier, that even Republicans, supporters of President Trump, are having to say, okay, let's make sure, yes, you have the right to protest, but obviously you do not have the right to be violent here. So everything very much on edge here at this hour, Lester.
And we should know this happening as the president losing support of essentially the two top, besides himself, the two top Republicans. The vice president, Mike Pence, putting out a statement before today's joint session, essentially rejecting the idea that he has any power to somehow overturn the results of the election, basically saying, I'm going to follow the Constitution. I can't do it. And then we've been referring, of course, to Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who made what appeared to be a very uncomfortable, emotional speech, basically saying this election, wasn't even close, that the president has exhausted his legal options, and basically imploring his fellow senators not to support this idea of challenging these electoral votes. This, again, a formal process that plays out every 4 years. It normally takes a half hour or so, but given the structure of the objections and now these protests, we don't know how long that process will take, even though we are assured of the outcome that at the end of the day and on January 20th, Joe Biden will be sworn in as the next president of the United States.